Good morning, Tom, and welcome to the Christmas edition of our Microsoft Teams update. How are you doing?
Yeah, good. Thanks, Rob. How are you?
Very good, thanks. I'm sporting my Christmas hat this morning, so
I know. I feel a bit left out now. I'm going to have to get myself a Christmas hat.
no problem. It's a little bit itchy, actually, so I wouldn't recommend it. Anyway, today I'd like to just quickly mention our last pod, which was the Microsoft Ignite event update. So I'd like to refer listeners, viewers, back to that update, because there were so many features in that session there. So 7 new features came through. Microsoft Business Voice was announced at Microsoft Ignite. The new kind of small business package from Microsoft. So that was really exciting. Plus loads and loads of new features, including private channels, pop-out windows, poly collaboration bars, and Project Cortex, talking about AI over your data. So there's lots of updates in that last.
Loads. I think the Business Voice is a huge deal. It didn't get a huge session at Ignite because it's only Canada and UK at the moment, so it's kind of almost a dry run. But for us being in the UK, that's a really good testing ground, and it's gone Canada and UK because they were both markets that had lots of SMB that wanted this functionality. So I would expect to see it early next year in other countries for sure.
Yeah, one question that's kind of on my mind there, Tom, and you might be able to answer is, we're a small business here at UC today, and we're on the E3 package, so it almost seems a little bit too much, but that's what we had to do to be a full Microsoft Teams phone system house. So have Microsoft got a plan around getting, organizations like ourselves that are in this kind of situation onto the new plan? Or
yeah, I mean, they're not super incentivized to encourage you to go down a cost level, obviously, so they're not going to spend a lot of time chasing you to spend less money. But you're the anomaly in terms of small businesses that you really wanted the conferencing and telephony, so you upped your plan. Most SMBs are on the business edition. You get so many features for comparatively so little money. That's really their target, is to go back to those businesses, and not direct even, it's all via CSP and via partners. So their vision is to have both the small partners, but really the big carrier partners that sell through to small businesses, just to ring them up and be like, hey, you're already buying Office 365 through us. Why don't we add telephony and conferencing to that? It's the only way Microsoft can scale is through partners in that space. They're not going to go direct for that kind of stuff.
Of course. Yeah, it's good to know. So anyway, let's talk about what's happened recently, because in the world of Microsoft Teams, things happen every month, which it always amazes me how agile such a big company like Microsoft are. So let's go through the updates. What's top of the list? I've got 20 million daily active users. Tell us more.
Yeah, so this was announced after the last pod, sort of late November time, but Microsoft have formally put out the numbers to the market that they have 20 million daily active users. So obviously there's more on a weekly and monthly basis, but those are users that are engaged in the product every single day. And they also said they've got 27 million voice and video meetings on the platform. So giving you an idea of just the level of real engagement they're getting with real users.
It's phenomenal, isn't it? And then that's quite a big chunk of the Office 365 user base now using Teams.
Yeah, well, I mean, the funny thing is, it's a big number, but there's 200 million active Office 365 monthly users. So not daily active, monthly active, but still. So that's only 10% of the user base of Office 365, the current user base, using it daily. So there's still lots of room for growth there. And you'd expect over time, as they more aggressively push Teams into the Office 365 user base, those numbers to just keep going up.
Well, absolutely. With Business Voice now, out and available, and soon to be rolled out into other countries, I can only imagine that traction speeding up even more. So, amazing performance from Microsoft there. So, in terms of competition, and it kind of leads us nicely into kind of next thing on our list, really, that we talked about previously. But talk to me about Slack. And Slack and Microsoft seem to have a bit of a bum fight going on at the moment, but what's happened recently?
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I mean, there's definitely a bum fight there, and Slack's messaging has changed a lot over the years. I mean, it's obviously I live in a biased world, so consider it what it is. But the welcome to the competition 3 years ago, You look at Slack now, and they're trying to position themselves as significantly different from Teams. So they had their Q3 earnings call, and one of the things the Slack CEO specifically said was he forecasts 50 million active Teams users in the next 6 months and 100 million in the next year. I think those numbers might be a bit aggressive in the timelines, but he's obviously trying to get ahead of the news and change the conversation. So he's like, look, Microsoft are going to win on seat count and active users, but we're significantly different because of other metrics that favor the way we look at the world. So it's interesting to see them directly confirm again that they see Teams as a big consideration for their growth, but they're trying to position that even though I think 70% of their big customers are also Office 365 customers, they're still confident that their experience can make people want to pay for Slack rather than taking Teams, even though the customer's already got access to Teams.
Yeah, it's very interesting to watch. Even the most recent kind of OK Boomer slant that was bandied about on the news and in social media. It did make me chuckle.
Yeah, and there's some validity to what they're saying in the sense of they were first to market, so customers that adopted them really wanted to work in collaborative chat workspaces and really got that culture. Marketing teams, dev teams, that tends to be the core, like people that already get the value of working in a chat space. So actually Microsoft are targeting everybody, so lots of people. That's a big cultural change. So if you look at Slack's user base, it wouldn't surprise me that on average more Slack users are using collaborative chat rooms than Teams users. But that's not really the question. The question is like, which ones are enterprises going to pay for or use that sustains your business to the valuation your business is, and that's the big question.
Yeah, certainly. So I think that's going to be another good one to watch as we go into the new year ahead. But certainly Slack and Microsoft Teams, together in the news. We've seen a lot of it this year so far. Let's move on to the next one. So you mentioned calling and meetings on Citrix VDI.
Yeah, this is just literally announced a couple of days ago. So Microsoft Teams has supported being on VDI, and VDI is virtual desktop infrastructure. So you have a local sort of dumb thin terminal and all your compute is done remotely in a data center or in Microsoft's cloud. It's a really common model in like some professional services and some FinServ and other places where they like the idea of keeping all their experience centralized and having dumb terminals on the desk. But that model works well for general computing, but for audio and video, having all your audio and video remote is not a great experience. The network implications are bad. So Microsoft had this in Skype for Business. They work with partners in this space to have a VDI support that has local media, even though the compute is in the data center. And that's what's been announced now. Citrix are the first certified partner to have full audio, video, and meeting support, even though you're in VDI.
Right. That is interesting because I've worked with Citrix over the years and a long time ago, but I can imagine that that fraught with challenges. And I'm a bit out of date with Citrix nowadays, but real-time voice and video across Citrix.
Yeah, it is a bit of a square peg round hole scenario. Like I want the video and audio to come the most logical network route, and my desktop is sitting hundreds of miles away, thousands of miles away in the data center somewhere. So fundamentally it's quite challenging. What's good this time round in Skype for Business, Microsoft took a lot of activity in the VDI space. In this instance, what Microsoft have done is basically said it's all going to be WebRTC, it's all going to be API driven, and you, Citrix, are responsible for the media bit of the solution. So they've created the ownership much more clearly that Citrix will be responsible for it, and VMware will be coming. Microsoft will have their own first-party version of this with Azure Desktop stuff in the cloud. So it's all WebRTC, it's all a bit more standards-based. I'm hoping that leads to a better and more supportable experience in Teams.
Yeah, and just another way of Microsoft demonstrating their commitment to Teams, isn't it? Just building these partnerships, making it work in these environments. there's virtually nowhere it's not going to work. So
yeah, and it's one of those areas where it's a niche section of the market, but a profitable section of the market very often. And I'm not sure, it'd be interesting on the other part actually, I'm not sure where Cisco or the other vendors are at with that. They've dabbled in that space, but do they have current, WebEx Teams type solutions for VDI? I'm not sure where they are with that.
Yeah, and that leads me nicely on to kind of Linux. And Linux is something I don't know very much about at all. So could you tell us what's just happened, around Microsoft Teams and Linux?
Yeah, so Linux is a super popular computing platform, but it's mostly back-end server-y type stuff. But there are a decent amount of people that use Linux on the desktop, and it tends to be developers, or it tends to be a kind of niche users in the organization that have a specific requirement to run Linux. Sometimes edu, but I mean rarely. It's mainly developers, but Slack has a good solution here, and Microsoft didn't have a first-party solution. So you could use a web browser, but Microsoft have plugged the gap now with an actual genuine client, a full user experience on Linux that supports audio, video meetings. So nice to see Microsoft supporting multiple platforms, just like they do on mobile, but also this plugs a competitive gap where even if 5% of your users use Linux, that's a very important 5%, and you wanted to give them a good client experience.
Yeah, they're ultimately not going to want to give Slack a differentiator there either, are they?
No, and just generally, Microsoft are being more open to cross-platform now. I mean, there's lots of Linux compute on Azure as well, so Linux is not the enemy anymore like it was under the Balmer years. It's like, well, cool, as long as you're using our stuff, if you want to use that, that's cool. If you want to use iOS, that's cool. If you want to use Android, that's cool. Just use our cloud, use our productivity stack. That's what they really want.
Yeah, and we saw that in Microsoft Ignite, last month, didn't we? With more and more kind of integrations with other competitive providers such as Zoom and Cisco.
Yeah, same on the video space. Like everybody's being a bit more mature about, look, it's a multi-vendor world out there. Even if you go all in on Teams, your partner organization may go all in on Zoom, and you want to be able to join their meetings, obviously. So I mean, you can't give Nadella all the credit of this, but he certainly spurred on a change in Microsoft where they were more pragmatic about where they can win and how they can deliver for their customers, and not just, it must be our phones, it must be our desktop, it must be Windows. They've been a lot more open to meeting customer requirements where they are.
Yeah, I think it's great to see, and I think the more they collaborate, the more they integrate, the better it is ultimately for the end user and the customer organization too. So
absolutely.
Yeah. Right, last but not least, Skype for Business Server CU2. Tell us more.
Yeah. So I mean, the news is there's not much news. If you're running Skype Business Server 2019, this is the latest update patch. There's no significant new features, which is exactly what we would expect. Microsoft have said multiple times that there won't be new features, so it's just lots of fixes. The one thing to look out for is this formally blocks what's called try existence. So try existence is running 3 different versions in the same customer or the same environment. So you're running 2013 and 2015 and 2019. That's always not been supported, but quite often customers would, not quite often, that's unfair, occasionally customers would bend the rules on that because it mostly worked. But now when you try and add another server and you've got 3 versions in play in your environment, it will actually block you and say, hey, you need to tidy this up. You can either have 2019 and 2015 or 2019 and 2013, but not all 3 in the same customer.
Okay, so you could potentially get caught out there if you've got a bit of a mixed bag of servers.
Yeah, it often happens, like, say, franchise organizations, for example, multinationals, they might devolve IT responsibility. So one of the franchise or one of the countries might be like, we want to be on latest and greatest, we're going to throw some money at this. But then the trailing one will be quite happy on 2013, has no intent, it tends to pay extra support. So for orgs that, I mean, this is all IT now with the cloud as well, for orgs that are devolved in terms of their IT decisions, they're being increasingly pulled together to say, no, this is a global strategy. It's a niche use case, but what's interesting is that's never been supported since the beginning of time, but now they're actively blocking it. So maybe they found an edge case issue where they're like, we want to formally block this, or maybe they're just trying to make the support line more obvious by physically not allowing customers to do it.
Sure. Well, that makes perfect sense. And going into next year, I'm sure we'll see more and more from Microsoft on the, kind of server front in a way. Not, as you said, more updates, more fixes, and that kind of thing. But are they going to make any more announcements potentially around the server edition?
I can't see it. I mean, if you look at Ignite, like you wouldn't know Skype Business existed other than one stand that was a how to get from Skype Business to Teams. They also financially incentivize anybody moving from server to Teams with a 15% licensing discount in the cloud. Like, they solidly want you in the cloud. Doesn't change the support stance, doesn't change the support timeline. You could still go to 2025 quite happily on server if that's your thing. But Microsoft will keep you patched and secure because that's their commitment. But even if they could backport features, mostly which they can't because they're using cloud compute and microservices, but even if they could, they are definitely not incentivized. They want you on that cloud journey for sure.
No, good. Well, thanks for the update, Tom. I mean, looking forward into next year, do you expect to see more regular updates from Microsoft around Teams? Do you think it's going to slow at some point?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like the product team has got a lot bigger over the last year. I mean, it's a fully fledged, massive product now with 20 million people using it every day. So like the level of consideration and testing and stuff does mean that things are slightly slower than they were in year one, where it was just like throw things out, see what happens. But there's still lots and lots of stuff to do. The big things for me going into Q1 are compliance recording. That is a huge unlock for lots of regulated industries. I think we'll see more and more industry specific features, like Microsoft seem to be going hard on industry, first line worker, healthcare, that kind of thing. But no, I don't think it will slow up just because they seem so committed to getting this right for customers. There's more and more to add there. It'll be interesting to see what we get next year, really.
Yeah, it will be, and I'm equally excited about what that roadmap's going to deliver, especially up and down the market segments as everyone becomes more, or certainly the appetite grows for cloud phone systems and cloud collaboration. So, interesting times ahead. Well, Merry Christmas, Tom. I wish you all the very best for New Year, and we'll be back in January.
Yeah, have a good one, and I hope all the listeners have a good one. And yeah, we'll be back next year with all the news as always.